Good morning, my friends. I hope you all had a good Shabbat. We are going to be continuing studying today's lesson in Rambam, today's chapter. And before we get to the actual laws of the Rambam, where we are discussing the various laws pertaining to specific mitzvahs, to specific commandments, the Rambam gives us a map. He wants us to understand the scope of the book of Rambam, of all the 14 volumes and what is contained with each one. So therefore, we're going to be studying over the next 3 days this map where the Rambam is going to tell us what is contained within every book, what laws are being discussed over there in its specifics. So we learned all the mitzvot, just in their order over the last couple days, but now we're going to be learning how these all translate into categories of laws in the way they are set up according to how the Rambam puts them into his 14 volume sets. So before, let's just go ahead without any further ado, and we will see, and the Rambam will tell us in his own words, how this all works. So first, he begins by splitting up 14 books. So number one, we have to figure out, and we have to know that there are 14 books, and then we'll be able to understand what is within each book. So the Rambam says that I saw fit that we should take all of these mitzvot that we listed out, all the 613, and divide them into 14 books. And this is their order. The first book, the Rambam says, I will include within it all the mitzvot that are a foundation of the faith taught to us by Moses. And these are the mitzvot which a person must know before anything else. For instance, the unity of God and the prohibition against serving idols. So therefore, he calls this book the book of knowledge, because this is the book of things that we have to know. It's an ethical book. It's a book of how we have to think, how we have to believe. The second book, the Rambam says, I will include within it all the mitzvot that are constant and which were commanded to us so that we will love God and constantly remember Him. For instance, the mitzvah of reciting the Shema, praying, putting on tefillin, the priestly blessing which the Kohanim give, circumcision is included in here because it is the point of circumcision is that we should always recall and remember God, even at times when we are not performing any other mitzvah. So therefore, the Rambam says all of these mitzvahs are all within the book called the Book of Love, because these commandments bring us to a love to God. The third book is, the Rambam says, I will include within it all the mitzvot that are associated with specific times. For instance, Shabbat, holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, etc. So therefore he says, I have called this the book of seasons or times. The fourth book, the Rambam says, he includes in it all the mitzvahs which involve intimate relations. For instance, marriage, divorce, yibum, as we have spoken about, etc. And he has called the book of women. The fifth book, out of 14, the Rambam says that he includes within it all the mitzvot of forbidden intimate relations. And similarly also, forbidden foods which we are not allowed to eat. Because, interestingly, the Rambam says that he has grouped these two items together, intimate relations and forbidden intimate relations and forbidden food for consumption, because in both of these mitzvot, God says that I will separate you from the other nations of the world and make you holy for the Jewish people, and therefore he includes both of these items together, because there are, according to Jewish law, there are certain women who a man is not allowed to marry, that according to the laws for the rest of the world would be permissible. So there are specific mitzvot that a Jewish person is not allowed to do, and both of these were highlighted in the Torah, so therefore the Rambam puts them together. So this book, he says, is called the Book of Holiness, because holiness also has the translation as separate and in its own realm, so to speak. So therefore, because the Torah highlights that idea, so therefore he calls it the Book of Holiness. The 6th book goes as follows. It includes within it any mitzvah of something that someone took upon himself in a vow. So he obligated himself or forbidden himself from doing something, and he calls it the Book of Utterances. Book number 7, he includes all the mitzvot that deal with the produce of the earth. For instance, sabbatical laws, jubilee years, the tithe, giving maaser, truma, which is the gift for the Kohen, and all the other mitzvot that are relevant to the subject, and he calls it the Book of Agriculture. It's a little bit of a complicated book, a lot of mathematical laws in there, but when we get there, we'll deal with it. The 8th book, he says that these are all the mitzvot that are involve the construction of the temple, the communal offerings that are brought regularly, and he calls it the Book of the Temple and its service. The 9th book, he says, includes within it all the mitzvot that are sacrifices which are brought by individuals. So he calls it the Book of Sacrifices. The 10th book is the book that involves ritual purity and impurity, and calls it the Book of Ritual Purity. The 11th book is the book that includes within it all the mitzvot that are dealing with an individual and his colleague and someone else, wherein there is an involvement of damage to property or personal injury, and he calls it the Book of Damages. The 12th book, is the book that includes within it all the mitzvot that govern sales and acquisition of property, and he calls it the Book of Acquisition. The 13th book is the book that includes within it all the mitzvot that are between an individual and his colleague that do not involve damage at the outset, but they might come to it. So for instance, the laws of a watchman, debtors, claims lodged against one another, and their denial, etc. So he calls this book the Book of Judgments. And book number 14, the last book of the Rambam, includes all the mitzvot that are delegated by the Sanhedrin, by the High Court. For instance, all the various things that only the High Court deals with. For instance, execution, the acceptance of testimony in any court, and the laws pertaining to kings and the wars that the king wages. And he calls it the Book of Judges. So these are the 14 volumes of Rambam. There are 14 volumes, each one with a very specific category in where the Rambam discusses all the mitzvahs that are pertaining to this subject. So he literally took all the 613 mitzvot, split them up into 14 categories, and here we have the set of Rambam. Now, within every book, there is a whole bunch of mitzvot. So therefore, the Rambam is going to be telling us, and he's going to be listing for us, the specific laws that are discussed within every book. And he goes through them, and it's very, very interesting, and it gives you a better picture of how the set of Rambam, how these 14 volumes work, what is the system, etc. So we will be going through them over the next 2-3 days. We're going to be going through every book with the basic split up of the categories of the mitzvot. So we're not going to go into all the details, but we're going to discuss the basic. So the first book, as we said, is the Book of Knowledge, contains within it 5 sets of laws. 5 categories, subcategories. So the first one is the laws of the foundations of the Torah, which are the laws of belief in God, etc. The second sub law is the laws of personal development, ethical laws. Then we have the laws of not serving idols. So over there you have many negative mitzvot, some positive mitzvot. That's an interesting set of laws. The last set of laws over here in this book is the law of doing teshuvah, of repentance. So that is a mitzvah where a person has to repent to God if he has, God forbid, committed a sin. So in this entire book there are 75 mitzvot in total out of 613. The second book is called the Book of Love, Sefer Ahava. In this book there are 6 subcategories, and the first one is the laws of reciting the Shema. So we have to recite it every morning, every evening, etc. The next set of laws is the laws of prayer and the priestly blessing, which is done during prayer. The next law is the laws regarding tefillin, mezuzah, and writing a Torah scroll. So all of these are actually included in one because they are all 3 written by a scribe, by a sofer, as it's called in Hebrew. He specifically has to be the one to write it with a special ink and feather and parchment and so on. It's a special procedure exactly how to write it, so he includes them all together. We have the laws of wearing tzitzit, the laws of blessings, and the laws of circumcision. So this is the second book, and this book has a total of only 11 mitzvot. So it's not as much, although there is a lot to discuss because it's something which we do every single day. So there are more details, and we have to know very well what we're doing. So that's the second book. The third book is the Book of Seasons, or the Book of Times. And this contains 10 separate topics. First one is the laws of Shabbat, which the laws of Shabbat are actually very complicated laws. And there's a lot to be discussed, and there are a lot of laws which the Rambam discusses over here. I think it's actually 30 chapters. So that's we're going to be studying the laws of Shabbat for a month when we get there. The next laws are the laws of Eruvin, which are the laws of making an Eruv, which is like the boundary for Shabbat. And even though it's actually not a biblical law, but only a law which the rabbis have added on, the Rambam includes it over here because it has quite some details and specifications which are quite complicated. Again, it's a little bit mathematical in learning circumference, etc. Exactly how it has to be. So the Rambam includes that in this book. Then the next laws are the laws regarding resting on Yom Kippur. And then we have the laws regarding the laws of resting on the holidays, all the other ones. Then we have the laws regarding chametz and the matzah, the laws of Passover. Then we have the laws regarding the half shekel, that even though we don't do it today in the same way, but it's something that was done at a certain time during the year. It's not a holiday, but it was done at a certain time period during the year, so the Rambam includes it in here as well. The laws regarding the sanctification of the new month, which sounds pretty simple, but actually the Rambam goes, I think it's 18 chapters where the Rambam is discussing exactly in astronomy. He gives us a really good picture of understanding when we can tell when is the new month, how exactly the calendar works. It's quite fascinating, quite complicated as well, but it's a very interesting set of laws, from the hardest ones in the Rambam. But we'll deal with it when we get there. the laws of fasts, and the laws of the Megillah, of Purim and Chanukah. So this is all the mitzvot of the third book, and within this book there are 35 total mitzvot, 19 positive and 16 negative. So that's it's not so many mitzvot, but it's 35. All right, next book, and this is the last book that we're going to be discussing today, is called the Book of Women, Sefer Nashim. And it contains within it 5 subcategories. And they are the laws of marriage. So there are various laws pertaining to how marriage works. The laws of divorce. The laws of Yibum and Chalitza, which we said was, again, is a case where someone marries a woman, he dies, now his brother, he dies without children. Now his brother, now there is a mitzvah for him to marry his sister-in-law, who now became a widow because her husband passed away. So there's a mitzvah for him to marry her. If they don't want to get married, so then there is a way to get out of it, so to speak. The next laws are the laws pertaining to a maiden, a virgin maiden, who has had something happen to her, someone raped her, God forbid, etc. So the laws of all of that. The last set of laws in this book are the laws pertaining to a sota. Sota is a woman who her husband told her that she shouldn't be speaking to a certain individual, and she's caught talking to him, and they're secluded in a room, etc. That it looks like there might have something bad might have happened over here, and there is a whole procedure what to be done. So anyhow, this is the end of the 4th book, the Book of Women. Contains a total of 17 commandments, 9 positive and 8 negative. So with that, we actually complete the 4th book and our lesson for today. I hope you guys all have a very good week, and God willing, we will continue tomorrow with the next couple volumes, and then the day afterwards we will continue all the way till the end of understanding the various books of the Rambam and what is included within each one. And ultimately, God willing, we will begin to learn the entire Rambam, starting from law number 1. All right, all the best.